I came home from my weekend camping trip to find Karen Strickland and three HOA board members sitting in folding chairs inside my garage, discussing community beautification initiatives like they owned the place. When I asked what the hell they were doing, Karen looked me dead in the eye and said, "This space has always been designated for community use, honey. Your father knew that." My father had been dead for 6 months, and he'd never mentioned anything about surrendering his garage to the neighborhood's self-appointed dictator. I'd spent the long Labor Day weekend camping in the Blue Ridge Mountains with some college friends, looking forward to getting back Sunday evening and finishing the electrical work that would complete my studio setup. When I pulled into my driveway around 8 p.m., I immediately noticed lights on in the garage, even though I distinctly remembered turning everything off and locking up before leaving Friday morning. As I walked closer to investigate, I could hear multiple voices coming from inside the garage. People were talking about landscaping budgets, violation enforcement procedures, and maintaining community standards, in the kind of official tones that suggested this was some kind of formal meeting. I opened the side door to find four people sitting in folding chairs arranged in a neat semicircle, with Karen positioned at the front holding a clipboard and leading what was obviously an official HOA board meeting in my private garage. "Excuse me?" I said, standing in the doorway of my own property and feeling like I was interrupting something I should have been invited to. "What exactly is going on here?" Karen looked up from her clipboard with the kind of patient expression you'd give a child who'd interrupted adult conversation at exactly the wrong moment. "Oh, Nate, sweetheart. You're back earlier than expected. We're just finishing up our monthly planning session." "In my garage?" "This space has been designated for community use, honey. Your father was always very accommodating about these arrangements." I looked around the garage, taking a detailed inventory of what had changed while I was away. Someone had moved my tools, my drum kit, and my electronic equipment to the corners to make room for folding chairs. A card table covered with official-looking paperwork, and several boxes labeled Meeting Materials Karen, in neat block letters that looked like they'd been printed with a label maker. My father never mentioned anything about community use of this garage. "Well, your father was very private about HOA business. But this space has always been available for board meetings when the community center isn't suitable." Board member Tom Martinez, a guy I'd known since high school who lived 3 houses down, shifted uncomfortably in his chair and wouldn't make eye contact with me. "Karen, maybe we should discuss this arrangement with Nate privately before our next meeting." "There's nothing to discuss," Karen replied with the kind of authority that suggested the conversation was over. "The usage agreement is clearly established in the property records." "What usage agreement? I never signed anything." Karen rifled through the papers on her table with theatrical efficiency and produced a document that looked like it had been printed on a home computer using Microsoft Word templates. "Temporary Community Space Usage Authorization." It read in bold letters at the top. I studied the document more carefully. It had today's date, Karen's signature in blue ink, and a bunch of official-sounding language about community cooperation and shared resources. But there was no official seal, no notarization, no legal formatting, and definitely no signature from me or my father. I never signed this document. "Your father's estate transfer included all existing HOA arrangements and community cooperation agreements." "Show me where that's documented." "It's standard procedure, Nate. When property transfers within the community, all existing agreements remain in effect." The other board members were looking increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Lisa Chen, who lived across the street and had always been friendly when we ran into each other at the mailbox, spoke up quietly. "Maybe we should table this discussion and reconvene at the community center next week like we usually do." "The community center is being fumigated this week," Karen replied without missing a beat. "Termite treatment. We need this space for essential HOA business that can't be delayed." "Find another space," I said, my patience starting to wear thin. "This is my private property." "Nate, I understand you're new to property ownership and HOA responsibilities, but community needs sometimes take precedence over individual preferences. That's how neighborhoods maintain their standards and property values. Community needs don't include unauthorized use of private garages." Karen stood up and began collecting her papers with the kind of dramatic efficiency that suggested she was used to making grand exits when challenged. "We'll continue this discussion later when you've had time to review the relevant documentation and understand your responsibilities as a community member." "There is no relevant documentation because you just made this up 5 minutes ago." "Good evening, Nate. I'll be in touch about scheduling our next meeting." Karen and the other board members filed out of my garage, leaving me standing there surrounded by folding chairs and feeling like I'd just been gaslit by a professional con artist. After they left, I spent 2 hours searching through every box of my father's papers, looking for any mention of HOA usage agreements, community space designations, or anything that would give Karen the right to hold meetings in his garage. I found his original HOA membership documents from when he'd bought the house, copies of the community bylaws, and years of correspondence about routine matters like annual fees and landscaping assessments. But there was absolutely nothing that gave anyone permission to use his garage for community meetings. The next morning, I called the HOA management company to get official clarification about the situation. Willowbrook Heights HOA, this is Jennifer speaking. How can I help you today? Hi, this is Nate Hollis on Maple Drive. I need to verify some information about community space usage agreements for my property. Let me pull up your file. I heard typing and the rustling of papers. Okay, I have your property information here. What specific details do you need? Karen Strickland claims there's an existing agreement that allows the HOA to use my garage for board meetings. I can't find any documentation of this arrangement in my father's papers. Hold on, let me check our master records for any special use designations. More typing and a longer pause. I don't see any community space designations for your property, Mr. Hollis. All our official board meetings are held at the Community Center Clubhouse or the main conference room. So there's no legal basis for using my garage as a meeting space? Not according to our official records. If there's a dispute about property usage rights, you might want to consult with a real estate attorney who specializes in HOA law. I hung up feeling vindicated, but also increasingly concerned about what Karen might try next. If she was willing to lie about having authorization to use my garage, what other fabrications might she come up with? That afternoon, I made a trip to the electronics store and invested in a comprehensive security camera system. If Karen was going to continue this nonsense, I wanted high-definition documentation of every move she made. I spent Monday evening installing 4 cameras with night vision and motion detection. One covering the garage entrance, one watching the driveway, one monitoring the side yard, and one covering the front of my house. All the cameras were connected to a cloud storage system that would preserve footage even if someone tried to tamper with the equipment. Tuesday evening, I was working on a client project at my computer when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the garage camera. I opened the security app to see Karen unlocking the side door with a key I'd never seen before and didn't know existed. I watched in real time as she spent about 25 minutes inside the garage, rearranging chairs and setting up what looked like meeting materials on the folding table. She moved my drum kit again, pushed my amplifier against the wall, and organized the space like she was preparing for another board meeting. When she finished, she locked the door behind her and walked back to her house like she owned the place. I immediately went out to check the garage. She'd rearranged my entire workspace again, moving my equipment to accommodate her meeting setup. But the most concerning discovery was realizing that somehow she had a key to my garage that I'd never given her. First thing Wednesday morning, I called a locksmith and had all the locks on the garage changed. Whatever key Karen was using would no longer work, and I made sure to get the only copies. Wednesday evening, my security camera caught her approaching the garage and trying to unlock the door with her old key. When it didn't work, she stood there for several minutes, clearly frustrated and confused, before trying the key multiple times and finally giving up. Thursday brought an aggressive knock on my front door at 7 a.m. Karen stood there with an official-looking envelope and the kind of expression that suggested someone was about to have a very bad day. Nate, I need to serve you with a formal notice regarding your interference with established community activities. The envelope contained a document titled, Notice of Community Space Obstruction, printed on letterhead that looked official but had clearly been created on a home computer. You are hereby notified that your recent actions have constituted deliberate interference with established community space usage protocols. Changing locks on designated community areas without proper HOA approval constitutes a violation of community cooperation bylaws and neighborhood harmony standards. You have 48 hours to provide replacement keys to authorized personnel or face potential fines and enforcement actions. The document was signed by Karen and included reference numbers for HOA bylaws that I was pretty sure didn't exist. Karen, this garage is my private property. You have no legal right to demand keys to my personal storage space. The HOA board disagrees with your interpretation of property usage rights. What board? You're one person creating fake documents on your computer. I represent the legitimate authority of this community, and I won't tolerate deliberate obstruction of official HOA business. Show me one real document that gives you authority to use my garage. Not something you printed at home, but an actual legal agreement. I'll be expecting those replacement keys by Saturday morning, Nate. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. After Karen left, I decided it was time to get professional legal advice. I found a real estate attorney who specialized in HOA disputes and scheduled an emergency consultation for Friday morning. Attorney Michael Rodriguez had been dealing with HOA conflicts for 15 years, and he listened to my story with the kind of expression that suggested he'd heard similar tales of abuse before. He reviewed all my documentation: the property deed, HOA bylaws, Karen's fake notices, and my security camera footage of her trespassing. "You're absolutely right," he said after studying everything for about 20 minutes. "She has no legal authority whatsoever to use your garage for any purpose. These documents she's producing are completely fabricated and have no legal standing." "What should I do?" "I'll send a formal cease and desist letter demanding that she stop trespassing on your property immediately. If she continues this behavior, we can pursue criminal charges for trespassing and civil litigation for harassment." "How long does that process usually take?" "Could be weeks or months, depending on how cooperative she is and whether the police take it seriously." I left the attorney's office feeling better about my legal position but frustrated about the potential timeline. Karen could continue harassing me and trespassing on my property for months while the legal system slowly ground through the process. That's when I had an idea that would solve the problem much faster and more definitively. Friday evening, I posted an ad on Craigslist that would change everything. Free garage studio space. Musicians welcome detached garage available for band practice and music projects. Fully soundproofed with electrical power, good acoustics, and room for full drum kit setup. Available Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday evenings, 6 to 9 p.m. Looking for serious musicians who aren't afraid to make some noise and want a dedicated practice space. Perfect for rock, punk, metal, or any high-energy music. Contact Nate for details and audition. I got 18 responses within 3 hours. Saturday morning, I scheduled auditions with 5 different bands who were interested in the space. The first was a folk duo with acoustic guitars and voices that wouldn't disturb a sleeping baby. The second was an indie rock trio with moderate volume levels and a mellow sound that Karen probably wouldn't even notice. The third band was promising. A metal group with serious amplification and double bass drums that could rattle windows. The fourth was a jazz fusion quartet with complex rhythms and impressive technical skills, but not quite the sound I was looking for. The fifth band was absolutely perfect. The Moths were a 4-piece punk rock group with energy levels that could power a small city and volume levels that could wake the dead 3 counties away. Lead singer Jake Morrison had purple hair, multiple facial piercings, and looked like he'd stepped directly out of a 1980s music video. Guitarist Sarah Chen could make her instrument sound like a chainsaw having an argument with a motorcycle when she wanted to. Bass player Mike Rodriguez had arms covered in tattoos depicting various punk rock icons and a smile that suggested he genuinely enjoyed causing controlled chaos. And drummer Amy Walsh attacked her kit like she was trying to beat it into submission while maintaining perfect rhythm. "We've been looking for practice space for months," Jake explained, surveying the garage with obvious appreciation. "Most places don't appreciate our intensity." "How intense are we talking about?" "Let us show you." Sarah plugged her guitar into a massive amplifier, cranked the volume to about 70%, and played a single chord that shook dust off the garage rafters and made my ears ring. "Perfect," I said immediately. "You can practice here 3 nights a week. Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday from 6 to 9 p.m. What's the catch? Most people want money or deposits or all kinds of restrictions. No catch. Just play as loud as you want and have as much fun as possible. You sure about this? We get pretty wild during practice sessions." "I'm counting on it." The Moths moved their equipment in that afternoon. 2 full stacks of amplifiers, a professional sound system, and Amy's drum kit that included 2 bass drums and enough cymbals to outfit a small orchestra. Their first official practice session was Tuesday evening, and the music was absolutely glorious. Loud, aggressive, fast-paced punk rock with lyrics about rebellion, social justice, and questioning authority. The kind of music that could be heard clearly from 3 blocks away and made everyone within earshot either love it or hate it with no middle ground. My immediate neighbors came out of their houses to see what was happening. Most seemed more curious than annoyed, with several people nodding along to the beat and a few teenagers actually dancing on the sidewalk. Around 8:30, I noticed Karen's front door open and her silhouette appear in the doorway, clearly trying to identify the source of what she probably considered an assault on community tranquility. Wednesday morning, my phone rang at 6:45 a.m. with a call that I'd been expecting. "Nate, this is Karen Strickland. We need to discuss the noise situation immediately." "Good morning, Karen. What noise situation? Don't play innocent with me. That ridiculous racket coming from your garage last night was completely unacceptable for a residential neighborhood." "You mean the band practice?" "Band practice? This is a family community, not some kind of concert venue or music festival. The city noise ordinance allows music until 10 p.m. on weekdays and 11 p.m. on weekends. The band stopped at exactly 9 p.m. I don't care what some city ordinance says. This behavior is completely disruptive to community harmony and neighborhood character. Karen, you've been trespassing in my garage for weeks, holding unauthorized meetings and treating my property like your personal conference room. Now you're complaining that I'm actually using it for its intended purpose? That's completely different. HOA meetings serve the greater community good and maintain property values. And music serves my personal enjoyment and creative expression. It's my property, and I can use it however I want within legal limits. I'm filing a formal complaint about this situation with the County Noise Control Office. Go ahead. While you're at it, explain to them why you think you have the right to hold meetings in other people's garages without permission." Karen hung up without another word, but I could hear the fury in her breathing before the line went dead. Thursday evening, the Moths held their second practice session, and this time they seemed even more energetic and loud than before. They'd apparently been working on new material, including a song called Suburban Nightmare that featured a bass line capable of rattling windows 2 houses away and lyrics about conformity, HOA tyranny, and the soul-crushing nature of planned communities. Around 8:30, I was sitting on my front porch enjoying the show when a police car pulled up in front of my house. Officer David Park got out and walked over with the kind of relaxed demeanor that suggested this wasn't exactly a high-priority emergency call. "Evening, Nate. Got a noise complaint about loud music from your garage. They're within the legal time limits, right?" "Yeah, they've got another hour and a half before it becomes a violation. Actually, the music sounds pretty good from out here. What kind of band is it?" "Punk rock group called The Moths. Want to come in and meet them?" "Sure, why not?" Officer Park ended up staying for 30 minutes, talking to the Moths about their music, their influences, and their goals as a band. He even requested a few specific songs and seemed genuinely impressed with their energy and technical skill. When he finally left, he made sure to wave cheerfully at Karen's house, where she was standing in her front window with her phone pressed to her ear, presumably calling in additional complaints to anyone who would listen. Friday morning brought another official-looking document from Karen, this one even more threatening than the previous notices. Final notice: community disruption violation. It announced in bold red letters, "Your continued use of private property for excessive noise generation constitutes a serious violation of community harmony standards and neighborhood character preservation requirements. Unless this disruptive behavior ceases immediately, the HOA will pursue all available enforcement options, including substantial fines, legal action, and potential property liens to recover damages and enforce compliance." I called Attorney Rodriguez and read him the notice over the phone. "She's really losing touch with reality," he said. "Save everything she gives you. This is all excellent evidence of harassment and abuse of authority. Should I be worried about her threats regarding fines and property liens? Absolutely not. She has no legal authority to fine you or place liens on your property for any reason, but she might escalate her harassment in other ways, so keep documenting everything." Saturday evening, the Moths were scheduled for their biggest practice session yet. They'd invited a few friends to watch, and word had spread through the local music scene that there was a new venue for loud, aggressive music. About 20 people showed up: other musicians, music fans, and even a few neighbors who'd been curious about the band since Tuesday's debut performance. The Moths were halfway through an extended version of Authority Complex when my security cameras picked up suspicious movement in my backyard. I checked the app on my phone and saw Karen sneaking around the side of my house in the darkness, carrying what looked like wire cutters and moving with the kind of stealth that suggested she was up to no good. I watched in real time as she approached the electrical panel that powered the garage and began examining the main power cable that fed electricity to my studio setup. "Hey everyone," I called out to the crowd. "You might want to watch this." I held up my phone so people could see the security camera footage of Karen preparing to cut my electrical cables. The music stopped immediately as everyone gathered around to watch Karen commit what was obviously criminal vandalism. "Is she really about to cut your power?" asked Jake. "Looks like it." "That's insane. She could electrocute herself." On the phone screen, we watched Karen position the wire cutters around the main electrical cable and begin cutting through the thick insulation. The garage lights went out immediately, plunging us into darkness. "That crazy woman just cut our power," Amy shouted. I immediately called 911 and reported someone vandalizing my electrical system and trespassing on my property. Then I called out to the crowd to let everyone know what was happening and that the police were on their way. By the time Officer Park arrived 15 minutes later, Karen was back in her house pretending nothing had happened. But my security cameras had captured everything in high-definition detail, and I had 20 witnesses who'd watched the live footage. "That's definitely criminal vandalism," Officer Park said after reviewing the footage on my phone. "Property damage, trespassing, utility tampering, and probably reckless endangerment. I need to arrest her immediately." The crowd of musicians and neighbors followed us over to Karen's house like we were leading some kind of bizarre parade. She answered the door in her bathrobe, acting shocked and innocent when she saw Officer Park standing there with handcuffs. "Karen Strickland, you're under arrest for criminal vandalism, trespassing, and reckless endangerment," Officer Park announced. "This is absolutely ridiculous. I was protecting the community from noise pollution and disruption. You cut someone's electrical cables with wire cutters. That's a felony, and you could have been seriously injured or killed. That noise was completely unacceptable for a residential neighborhood. So you decided to commit crimes to stop it?" As Officer Park was handcuffing Karen in front of the entire crowd, she looked directly at me with pure hatred in her eyes. "This isn't over, Nate. I'll make sure you regret the day you moved back to this neighborhood." "Actually, Karen, I think it is over. You just graduated from trespassing to felony vandalism. You deliberately provoked this situation. You brought in that noise machine specifically to torment me. I brought in a band to use my own garage because you were trespassing in it. If you hadn't been stealing my space, none of this would have happened." Karen spent the night in county jail and was released Sunday morning on $5,000 bail. But the damage to her reputation and authority was already irreversible. Sunday afternoon, I posted the security footage in the Willowbrook Heights Facebook group with a detailed caption explaining the entire situation. "HOA President Karen Strickland caught on camera vandalizing my electrical system because she doesn't approve of my band practice schedule. This is the same person who's been trespassing in my garage for weeks, holding unauthorized meetings and fabricating fake HOA documents to justify her illegal behavior." The video went viral within hours. Hundreds of comments from neighbors expressing shock, anger, and support for my situation. People were sharing their own stories about Karen's harassment, abuse of authority, and manufactured violations. Several neighbors mentioned that they'd been afraid to challenge her because they thought she had unlimited power as HOA president. The comment thread turned into a massive expose of Karen's behavior over the years. Fake regulations, arbitrary fines, harassment campaigns against anyone who questioned her authority, and systematic abuse of her position for personal vendettas. Monday morning, I received calls from all 4 remaining board members requesting an emergency HOA meeting to address what they called the Karen situation and determine appropriate action. The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday evening at the community center, with notice sent to every homeowner in the development. Based on the response to my Facebook post, this was going to be the most well-attended HOA meeting in the neighborhood's history. I spent Tuesday preparing a comprehensive presentation, security footage, documentation of Karen's trespassing and harassment, legal opinions from my attorney, a timeline of her escalating abuse, and copies of all the fake documents she'd created to justify her actions. Wednesday evening, the community center was absolutely packed. More residents showed up than had attended meetings in the past 5 years combined, all curious about the scandal involving their HOA president and eager to hear both sides of the story. Karen sat at the front table looking defiant and angry, flanked by the other board members who seemed increasingly uncomfortable with their association with her behavior. Board member Tom Martinez called the meeting to order at 7 p.m. sharp. "We're here tonight to address serious allegations of misconduct by HOA President Karen Strickland, and to determine appropriate actions for the board and the community. I'd like to present evidence of ongoing harassment, trespassing, and illegal activity, I said, standing up with my folder of documentation and my laptop ready for presentation. The floor recognizes Nate Hollis for a formal presentation of evidence. I connected my laptop to the room's projector and began presenting the security footage chronologically. The room fell completely silent as everyone watched Karen repeatedly entering my garage without permission, moving my equipment, holding unauthorized meetings, and finally committing criminal vandalism by cutting my electrical cables. Over the past 6 weeks, Karen Strickland has repeatedly trespassed on my private property, fabricated fake HOA documents to justify her illegal actions, harassed me with manufactured violations, and ultimately resorted to criminal vandalism when I refused to cooperate with her completely unauthorized demands. I distributed copies of all her fake notices, phony authorization documents, and threatening letters to everyone in the room. Every regulation she cited is completely made up. Every document she produced is fraudulent. Every action she took was outside her legal authority as HOA president. She has been operating a systematic campaign of harassment and abuse against anyone who challenges her manufactured authority. The room erupted in discussion as neighbors compared notes about their own experiences with Karen's overreach, fabricated violations, and retaliatory enforcement actions. Karen stood up abruptly, her face red with anger and her voice shaking with rage. This is nothing but a coordinated attack on legitimate HOA authority. Nate Hollis has been deliberately undermining community standards and neighborhood harmony since the day he moved back. By using my own garage for its intended purpose, by weaponizing music to disrupt our peaceful residential community. I'm not weaponizing anything. I'm just living in my house and using my property according to my legal rights. You deliberately brought in that noise machine specifically to spite me and destroy neighborhood tranquility. I brought in a band because you were trespassing in my garage and I needed to reclaim my own space. If you hadn't been stealing my property, I wouldn't have needed to take action. You're a social saboteur who's trying to destroy everything we've built in this community. Karen, you cut my electrical cables with wire cutters. That's a felony. You could have been electrocuted. I was protecting community standards from deliberate disruption. Board member Lisa Chen spoke up from the front table. Karen, do we actually have any legitimate authority to regulate garage usage for music practice within legal noise limits? We have community harmony standards and neighborhood character preservation requirements. What specific standards? Can you cite the actual bylaw numbers and show us the documentation? Karen fumbled through her papers frantically but couldn't produce any real legal documentation. It's standard HOA authority for maintaining property values and community standards. Tom Martinez looked deeply uncomfortable. Karen, I think we need to acknowledge that your actions have created serious legal liability for the entire HOA board and the community association. Legal liability? If you've been entering private property without authorization, forging HOA documents, and committing criminal acts, we could all be sued for failing to supervise your behavior. I was protecting community interests and property values. You were committing crimes, I said calmly, and now you're trying to drag the entire board down with you. Board member David Kim had been quiet through most of the meeting, but he finally spoke up with obvious frustration. Karen, I've been on this board for 6 years, and I had no idea you were using private garages for meetings or creating fake documents. When did you start operating independently of board oversight? I've always acted in the best interests of this community. Without board approval, without legal authority, and apparently without any connection to reality. I moved to remove Karen Strickland as HOA president, effective immediately, declared Lisa Chen. Seconded, said Tom Martinez without hesitation. This is a witch hunt, Karen screamed, standing up and knocking over her chair. You people don't understand what it takes to maintain community standards and property values. Without proper enforcement, this neighborhood would turn into a complete slum. All in favor of removing Karen Strickland as HOA president due to abuse of authority, harassment of residents, trespassing, and criminal behavior? Tom Martinez called for the vote. Every hand in the room went up except Karen's. Even people who'd been afraid to challenge her for years were now voting for her removal. Motion carries unanimously. You'll all regret this decision when your property values start declining because nobody's willing to enforce standards and maintain neighborhood character. The only thing threatening our property values is your criminal behavior. replied Sarah Chen, Jake's mother who lived down the street and had been dealing with Karen's harassment for months. I'll sue every one of you for this illegal action. With what authority? Asked Frank Rodriguez, an elderly resident who'd been intimidated by Karen for years. You just got fired. Karen gathered her papers with shaking hands, glaring at everyone in the room like they'd personally betrayed her. This community is going to fall apart without proper leadership, and when it does, don't come crying to me. She stormed out of the meeting, slamming the door so hard that the building's windows rattled and the overhead lights flickered. The board spent the next hour discussing comprehensive damage control and prevention measures. They voted to require written board approval for any enforcement actions, mandatory documentation of all regulations in officially recorded bylaws, a formal appeals process for violations, term limits to prevent accumulation of unchecked power, and regular audits to ensure board members were operating within their legal authority. They also voted unanimously to refer Karen's criminal actions to the district attorney for potential prosecution and to consult with the community's insurance company about liability protection. After the official meeting ended, dozens of neighbors approached me with support, apologies for Karen's behavior, and their own stories about her abuse of authority over the years. I can't believe she was just making up regulations and fake documents, said Frank Rodriguez. She's been completely out of control for years, added Maria Santos. Most of us were just too intimidated to challenge her because we thought she had unlimited authority. The band actually sounds really good, said teenage neighbor Connor Kim. My friends think it's awesome that we have live punk rock music in the neighborhood now. When's the next practice session? Asked Jake's mother, Sarah. I'd like to bring some friends to listen. Thursday evening, the Moths held their first practice session since Karen's electrical sabotage and criminal arrest. Word had spread throughout the neighborhood and the local music community, and about 30 people showed up to listen from lawn chairs set up in my driveway and front yard. It turned into an impromptu block party that lasted until almost 10 p.m. Someone brought coolers full of beer and soda. Another neighbor contributed homemade snacks and sandwiches. Kids were dancing on the sidewalk, and teenagers were filming everything for social media. Even some of the older residents who'd initially been skeptical about loud music were tapping their feet and nodding along to the rhythm. Karen's house remained completely dark and silent throughout the entire celebration. Friday morning, a for sale sign appeared on Karen's front lawn. The sign was crooked and appeared to have been installed hastily in the dark, like she couldn't wait to get out of the neighborhood as quickly as possible and escape the consequences of her actions. By Friday afternoon, neighbors were reporting that Karen had been loading boxes into a moving truck and appeared to be packing up her house with desperate urgency. Saturday evening, the Moths announced they were dedicating their practice session to what they called Karen's Exit Tour, a celebration of freedom from tyranny and the restoration of common sense to the neighborhood. More than 50 people showed up for what became the biggest block party Willowbrook Heights had seen in decades. Families brought lawn chairs and blankets, someone set up a barbecue grill, and several neighbors contributed food and drinks for everyone. Someone had even brought one of Karen's old folding chairs from her garage meetings and was using it as premium seating right in front of the makeshift stage. Jake grabbed the microphone between songs and addressed the crowd with genuine emotion in his voice. This next song is called Property Rights, and it's dedicated to everyone who's ever had to deal with a power-tripping HOA president or any other petty tyrant who thinks they can steal your freedom. The crowd cheered enthusiastically as the Moths launched into their loudest, most aggressive song yet, a punk rock anthem about standing up to bullies, defending your rights, and refusing to be intimidated by fake authority. I looked around at my neighbors, families dancing together, kids playing games on the lawn, teenagers actually putting down their phones to listen to live music, and adults having genuine conversations instead of whispered complaints about HOA violations. This was what community was supposed to look like. Not Karen's vision of enforced conformity, manufactured compliance, and fear-based control, but actual people enjoying each other's company, celebrating their differences, and supporting each other against petty tyranny. The Moths finished their set around 9:30 p.m. to thunderous applause from the crowd. As people started packing up their chairs and heading home, my neighbor Paul Rodriguez walked over with a huge grin on his face. "Nate, I have to ask you something important." "What's that?" "Do you need to store anything in my garage?" "Why would you ask that?" "Because if it costs me my sanity like it cost Karen, I'll have to pass." We both burst out laughing as Karen's house sat empty and dark behind its crooked for sale sign. Sunday morning brought unexpected visitors. a reporter from the local newspaper, and a crew from the regional news station. Apparently, my Facebook post about Karen's criminal behavior had been shared thousands of times and caught the attention of media outlets looking for stories about HOA abuse and community resistance. "We've been covering HOA corruption stories for years," explained reporter Jennifer Walsh. "But this is the first time we've seen someone fight back so creatively and effectively. I didn't set out to fight anyone. I just wanted to use my own garage. But when someone tried to steal it, you found a way to make noise they couldn't ignore." The news story ran Sunday evening and Monday morning, featuring interviews with me, several neighbors, and even the Moths. The headline read, "Rock Band Helps Homeowner Defeat Tyrannical HOA President," and the story went viral on social media. By Monday afternoon, I was getting calls from people across the country sharing their own HOA horror stories and asking for advice about fighting back against abusive board members. Tuesday evening marked the Moths' first practice session as local celebrities. The crowd was even bigger than Saturday's block party, with people driving from neighboring communities to hear the band that had helped defeat an HOA tyrant. Local music venues started reaching out to book the Moths for paid performances, and they were being featured in regional music publications as the punk band that fought the power and won. But the real victory wasn't the media attention or the community support. It was the transformation of our neighborhood from a place ruled by fear and arbitrary enforcement to a genuine community where people felt free to be themselves. Wednesday brought news that Karen's criminal case was moving forward. The district attorney had decided to prosecute her for felony vandalism, trespassing, and several other charges related to her abuse of authority and fabrication of official documents. Thursday evening, during the Moth's regular practice session, I noticed a familiar car parked across the street. Karen was sitting in her vehicle, watching the crowd and the band with an expression of pure hatred and disbelief. After about 20 minutes, she drove away without saying anything to anyone. Friday morning, Karen's house officially sold to a young family with 3 kids who seemed excited about the neighborhood's new reputation for community events and live music. Saturday brought the Moth's